Welcome to the show, friend. This has been a very interesting series, difficult for many people to watch. We have gotten, at different times when we have discussed this, we've gotten a lot of very positive feedback and a lot of people who are troubled and say, why are you doing that? Focus on child killing or the militant sodomite same-gender marriage movement. And they're valid questions. The simple truth of the matter is that Islam, historic Orthodox Islam, has enslaved a very large portion of the earth. Or to put it in simple terms, for those of you who are devout Christians, the cradle that rocked early Christianity now is completely in the hands of Islam. If you look at the cities where the book of Revelation, those 7 churches that are addressed, if you look at Galatia, Ephesus, I've been to Ephesus, seen the ruins. It's completely overrun. I've been to the cities that John the Revelator spoke of in the first chapters of the book of Revelation, seen the destroyed churches, seen the ruins of where John the Apostle himself was buried, where Luke the evangelist was buried. The total ruins now. Islam has practically wiped out Christianity in much of the area where Christianity first flourished. And if Islam had its way, Greece would have been lost and Spain would have been lost. But the Spaniards and later the Greeks drove Islam out, okay? And now our Sudanese brothers and Christians are in a fight. Our Nigerian Christian brothers and sisters are in a fight. Christians who are a severe minority in Iraq are being slain. I mean, you just go down the list. So the reason we're focusing on this is because we're not self-consumed. It's because we have a duty to remember our brothers and sisters that are in chains, as if in chains with them. That's what the writer of the book of Hebrews said. Remember those who are imprisoned as if in prison with them. So it is our duty to look at our Christian brothers and sisters that are enslaved and to see who their captors are and to understand what motivates and drives the captors. That is why we are doing this series, What Would Muhammad Do? If you want to understand the headlines that are coming out of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Egypt, Nigeria, Syria, Palestine, the Gaza Strip, Israel. If you want to understand it, these headlines, you've got to understand historic Islam. Then it will make sense, and only then will it make sense. We'll continue now with our series, What Would Muhammad Do? Hello, friend. Welcome to the program. This is show number 6 in a 7-part series dealing with this question, and I quote, how do the words and deeds of Islamic terrorists or Muslims who call for acts of terror and violence emulate the words and deeds of Muhammad? What I have found in not only my master's program, but in years of studying Islam, is that many scholars simply do not, whether through fear or negligence, or they don't feel comfortable with the material, for whatever reason, they do not dig that extra step. They don't go that extra mile and look at the connection of Muhammad's sunnah, his tradition, the hadith, the footsteps, the trodden path of Muhammad himself in relationship to acts of violence and terrorism or calls to violence and terrorism. And what we have shown in this series is that the devoted, committed Orthodox Muslim who looks at the history and the greatness and the golden age of Islam, he is committed to following in the footsteps of Muhammad. And Muhammad left a huge record of his life. Things that he said, things that he did that are not in the Quran, that are the model, the example of the devout Muslim. And as we've seen, many of the things that are happening today that you and I might call acts of terror are in fact events and deeds that were done in Muhammad's life that are being echoed now, but events and deeds that happen in Muhammad's life that are praised and glorified by devout Muslim scholars. We're going to talk today about Muhammad and anti-Semitism. Now, the following story is an account of what happened just after Muhammad won a key battle, the Battle of Badr. It was against polytheists, pagans of Mecca. And at that point, that was the first major battle that Muhammad ever fought in, and perhaps another day we'll study that Muhammad's message of peace and message of monotheism took a radical turn. And Muhammad began to feel that God was telling him to use violence, the sword, open war, assassination, murder, threat of violence for the conversion of those who were not following him, the true prophet, as he said, of Allah. So Muhammad went back and spoke to some Jews, and he said, and I quote, this comes, by the way, from Ibn Ishaq. The apostle assembled them in their market and addressed them as follows. O Jews, beware, lest God bring upon you the vengeance that he brought upon Quraysh and become Muslims. You know that I am a prophet who has been sent. You will find that in your scriptures and God's covenant with you. The Jews courageously defied him. They retorted, O Muhammad, you seem to think that we are your people. Do not deceive yourself because you encountered a people with no knowledge of war and got the better of them. For by God, if we fight you, you will find that we are real men. Now, I have to tell you, in the years of reading that I've done on Muhammad's relationship with the Jews, it's complex. In Muhammad's lifetime, a handful of Jews became Muslims. And clearly, he believed that he was their prophet, coming to them in the tradition of Moses, as the passage above shows. And as time went on, and Muhammad became the master of all Arabia, first he taxed the Jews, then he fought them, slaughtered some of them, enslaved some of them, had some of them murdered, made some of them sharecroppers. But when he was about to die, one of his last instructions was, he had two that were financial in nature, and then the one that he gave that had to do with the Jews was that no two religions were allowed to be, or were to be permitted to be on the Arabian Peninsula. They were to get rid of every other religion. So after Muhammad's death, all the Jews and the Christians who would not convert to Islam were expelled from Arabia. So it's clear that Muhammad's anger toward the Jews grew over time, as did his violence. And even if one makes the argument that Islamic nations have allowed Jews to live in relative peace within their borders, which has clearly happened at various points in history. In fact, Osama bin Laden, in his 2002 or 2004 fatwa, said, hey, the Jews live amongst us in some of our countries and we don't incinerate them. Well, of course, what he failed to mention was that the Jews pay a tax and basically are the slaves to the Muslims and are not full citizens. Anyway, it is true that at various points over 1,400 years that Jews lived amongst Muslims, but it's also clear that over 1,400 years, the words and deeds from Muhammad against the Jews fueled the virulent anti-Semitism that is found in Islamic speeches, writings, and attitudes, not to mention terrorist attacks on Israel and Jews around the world. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will look at specific instances recorded in the most revered Islamic sources of history in which Muhammad himself displayed a violent anti-Semitism that led to some Jews being horrifically killed. I'll be right back.